Frank Miller cleaned his old rifle with practiced hands. The metal gleamed under the Montana sun that poured through his cabin window. 20 years as a Marine sniper had given him habits that never died. Every morning, he woke at 5, ran 5 miles, and spent 30 minutes maintaining his favorite weapon. The rifle was nothing special to most people, just an old bolt-action model. But to Frank, it was an extension of himself. The small television in the corner played quietly. Frank rarely paid it much attention, but the breaking news banner caught his eye. He turned up the volume. We repeat, this is not a drill or fiction. First contact has been confirmed. Representatives from what they call the Galactic Confederation have landed in Washington, D.C., and are meeting with world leaders right now. Frank paused, rifle oil dripping from his cloth onto the wooden floor. The screen showed strange ships hovering over the Capitol. They were smooth, silver, and unlike anything humans had built. The camera zoomed in on tall, blue-skinned beings with 4 arms walking down a ramp. This changes everything, Frank whispered to his empty cabin. Over the next few days, Frank watched as the world transformed. The aliens, calling themselves the Retheni, were part of a vast group of species known as the Galactic Confederation. They had been watching Earth for decades and decided humans were finally ready for contact. Their leader, a stern-faced being named Zixtal, appeared on every channel. He spoke perfect English in a deep, rumbling voice. "We welcome Earth to the galactic community," Zixtal announced from the White House lawn. "As is customary, Earth will enter as a protectorate for the first century, under our guidance and protection." Something in his tone made Frank uneasy. He heard the words protection and guidance, but they sounded more like control and supervision. A week after first contact, the Retheni organized a public demonstration. Frank watched as Zixtal stood on a platform, surrounded by world leaders. "Many species worry about our technological advantage," Zixtal said, his 4 arms spread wide. "To ease your concerns, we will demonstrate our defensive capabilities and prove that our protection is absolute." Zixtal nodded to a smaller Retheni, who pressed something on his wrist. A faint shimmer appeared around the alien leader. "This is our most basic shield technology," Zixtal explained. "Even this simple version can stop your most powerful weapons. We invite your military to test it." Frank leaned forward as the American military brought out progressively stronger weapons. First came bullets from standard-issue rifles, then armor-piercing rounds. All bounced harmlessly off the shield. Next came rockets, which exploded before even touching the barrier. Even experimental laser weapons dissipated against the shield. "As you can see," Zixtal said with what Frank thought might be a smile, "your most advanced weapons cannot harm even our most basic defense. This is why our protection is valuable." The camera zoomed in as the shield rippled with each impact. Frank's eyes narrowed. Something about the way the shield reacted to the bullets caught his attention. The energy pulsed in patterns, different for each type of weapon. When a certain high-caliber round hit at a specific angle, the shield seemed to waver just slightly more than with other impacts. "Harmonic resonance," Frank muttered. His mind went back to his advanced combat training, where they studied how certain frequencies could shatter glass or weaken structures. Could these alien shields work on similar principles? His phone rang, startling him. It was Dan Weber, his friend from the shooting range where Frank worked as an instructor. "Are you seeing this?" Dan asked, his voice excited and worried at once. "Yeah," Frank replied, still studying the shield's reactions. "But I'm seeing something else too." "What do you mean?" Frank watched as the demonstration concluded. Zixtal stepped forward, his 4 arms raised in a gesture that somehow seemed both friendly and superior. "We look forward to guiding Earth into a new era," the alien announced. "Your planet is now under the protection of the Galactic Confederation." Frank's grip tightened on his phone. "I mean that shields have weaknesses. They always do. You just need to find the right frequency, the right angle, the right everything. You think you can break alien technology with your old hunting rifle?" Dan laughed nervously. Frank's eyes never left the screen as he replied, "Maybe not me alone, but I think we might have something they don't expect." 2 days after the SHIELD demonstration, Zixtal made another announcement that shook the world. Frank watched from his cabin, coffee growing cold in his hand. "The Galactic Confederation acknowledges Earth's proud warrior history," the alien leader said. His 4 blue arms were folded formally across his chest. "Therefore, we offer a challenge. If humans can breach our SHIELD technology within 30 days, Earth will be granted full membership status rather than becoming a protectorate." The camera panned to show the stunned faces of world leaders. One stepped forward to ask, "And if we fail?" Zixtal's large eyes blinked slowly. "Then you accept our assessment that humans require our guidance and protection for their own safety." Frank immediately recognized the trap. A protectorate status would mean Earth would have little say in galactic matters. Humans would be treated like children, not equals. That evening, Frank drove to town for supplies. The small diner was buzzing with talk about the challenge. The television showed military leaders and scientists being assembled worldwide to tackle the impossible task. "They'll never break those shields," said a man at the counter. "Did you see how those missiles just bounced off?" Frank ate his burger silently, watching as a woman appeared on screen. She had curly red hair pulled back tightly and spoke with fierce intensity. "The properties of the alien shield suggest they operate on principles we haven't fully explored in Earth physics," she explained to the reporter. "I believe they manipulate quantum fields in ways we've only theorized about." The caption identified her as Dr. Susan Carter, physicist from Idaho State University. Frank listened carefully as she continued explaining complex theories about barrier penetration and resonance fields. "We need to stop thinking about brute force and start considering harmonic disruption," she said. Frank nearly dropped his fork. It was exactly what he'd been thinking. The next morning, Frank did something he hadn't done in years. He put on his old service uniform, packed his truck, and drove 6 hours to Idaho State University. He didn't have an appointment or even a clear plan, but something told him this scientist might listen when others wouldn't. He found her in a small lab tucked away in the physics building. Papers covered every surface, and 3 computer screens displayed complex equations and wave patterns. "Dr. Carter," Frank said from the doorway. Susan looked up, startled. "Yes, can I help you?" "My name is Frank Miller, Lieutenant, Marine Corps, retired. I was a sniper for 20 years. And I think I noticed something about those alien shields that connects to what you said on TV." Susan's expression changed from annoyed to curious. "What do you mean?" Frank pulled out his notebook where he'd sketched the wave patterns he observed during the demonstration. The shield reacted differently to different impacts. When that 7.62 millimeters round hit at a 30-degree angle, the energy ripple was different, almost like it was tuning fork hitting the right note. Susan took the notebook, studying his drawings. "These are surprisingly accurate observations. You noticed this just by watching TV." Frank shrugged. "I spent my life studying how things react when they're hit. It's what kept me alive." She showed him her computer screens. "I've been running simulations based on the public footage. The shield seems to operate on a quantum field that repels matter and energy by creating a counterwave." She pointed to Frank's drawing. "Your observation matches my data. There might be a specific frequency or impact type that could create destructive interference. Like how a singer can shatter glass with the right note," Frank said. Susan nodded, suddenly excited. "Exactly. But they've already tested every conventional and experimental weapon in the military arsenal. What could we possibly use that they haven't tried?" Frank smiled slightly. "Maybe that's the problem. They're using new fancy weapons. What if we need something older? Something simpler?" Susan stared at him for a long moment. "You mean something primitive?" "Sometimes the old ways work when new technology fails," Frank said. "I've got a rifle and skills that predate their surveillance of Earth. Maybe that's what we need. Something they wouldn't expect because it's too simple." Susan grabbed her phone. "I need to make some calls. If you're right, we need to find out exactly what material and velocity would create the perfect resonance disruption. Frank nodded. And we need to do it fast. 28 days left on the clock. Susan's small university lab became their base of operations. For 3 days straight, they worked tirelessly. Frank slept on a cot in the corner while Susan ran simulations on her computers. The walls were soon covered with printouts, diagrams, and hastily scribbled notes. The shield operates on a quantum principle similar to wave cancellation, Susan explained, pointing to her latest simulation. It creates a perfect counterwave to whatever hits it. That's why energy weapons and high-velocity impacts fail. The higher the energy, the stronger the counter response. Frank rubbed his tired eyes. So we need something low energy that creates the right frequency. Exactly. But we need to test it, Susan said. And we can't exactly ask the aliens to let us shoot at their shields repeatedly. Frank paced the small lab. We need equipment, and we need someone who can craft special bullets to our specifications. Susan smiled for the first time in days. I might know someone. My brother-in-law, Joe Green, runs a private defense lab about 2 hours from here. He owes me a favor. Joe's facility was hidden in an industrial park that looked abandoned from the outside. Inside was a different story. State-of-the-art equipment filled the large warehouse space. Joe, a burly man with a thick beard, listened skeptically as they explained their theory. Let me get this straight, Joe said, crossing his arms. You think a specially made bullet, fired from an old rifle, might penetrate an alien force field that military-grade missiles couldn't scratch? Susan nodded firmly. The mathematics supported. Their shields create a counterwave to whatever hits them. But if we hit them with exactly the right material, moving at exactly the right speed, we might create a destructive resonance. Joe shook his head. It sounds crazy. The aliens don't expect it. Frank added. They're used to races that develop energy weapons once they reach space. No one tries kinetic weapons anymore. Joe walked over to a workbench. What kind of bullet are we talking about? Susan pulled out her notes. We need a specific mix of metals, primarily copper and lead, but with trace amounts of nickel and iron. The precise mix is critical, and it needs to hit the shield at exactly 853 meters per second. Frank added, no faster, no slower. Joe whistled. That's going to require custom-loaded ammunition and perfect shooting conditions. Can you help us? Susan asked. Joe stared at them for a long moment. The government has requisitioned my lab for official shield-breaking experiments starting tomorrow. But I can give you access tonight. They worked through the night. Joe's equipment allowed them to create alloy samples with precise compositions. Susan tested each one against a crude shield simulator she had built based on observational data. As dawn approached, they had their answer. A specific alloy, shaped into a bullet with exact dimensions, showed a 78% chance of disrupting the alien shield in the simulations. It's our best shot, Susan said, barely able to keep her eyes open. Joe began crafting the special bullets using a precision metal lathe. Frank inspected each one carefully. Now we need to test them against an actual alien shield, Frank said. Joe looked up from his work. That's your problem. I've risked enough just letting you use my equipment. Susan checked her phone. The official testing team is failing. They're trying increasingly powerful energy weapons, which is exactly what won't work, Frank said with frustration. As they loaded their equipment into Susan's car, Joe pulled Frank aside. I've got a cousin who works security at the alien compound in Washington. He says they're putting on another demonstration tomorrow to show off their personal shield technology, smaller scale than the first one. Frank's eyes lit up. Personal shields. You mean worn by individuals? Joe nodded. Supposedly even more advanced than the big ones. The aliens wear them constantly now, worried some human might try something desperate. Frank and Susan exchanged a glance. They both knew what they needed to do. How quickly can we get to Washington? Frank asked. Susan checked her watch. If we leave now and drive in shifts, we can make it by tomorrow afternoon. Frank carefully packed the special bullets into a padded case. 25 days left in their challenge. Let's see if humans can surprise them. As they drove away from Joe's facility, Susan looked worried. You know what we're planning is completely unauthorized, right? Probably illegal too. Frank nodded grimly. Sometimes saving the world requires breaking a few rules. The trip to Washington took 16 hours of hard driving. Frank and Susan took turns behind the wheel, stopping only for gas and coffee. They barely spoke, both lost in their thoughts about what lay ahead. When they reached the outskirts of the city, Susan pulled into a small motel. The place was rundown but anonymous, perfect for their needs. We need a plan, Frank said as they sat on the edge of the bed, studying a map of the city. The demonstration is tomorrow at noon in Lafayette Park. Security will be tight. Susan nodded, her eyes red from lack of sleep. I can get in with my university credentials. They're inviting scientists to witness the demonstration. But I can't get close enough with a rifle, Frank said. I'll need to find a position with a clear line of sight. They spent the evening scouting locations. Frank identified 3 buildings that offered the right angles and distances. One was an office tower undergoing renovations, with minimal security and a perfect view of Lafayette Park. That night, a breaking news alert caught their attention. The official government team had tried their most powerful experimental weapon, a particle accelerator mounted on a truck. It had failed completely against the alien shield. The leader of the Galactic Security Council has issued a statement, the newscaster said. High Commander Zixtal says he is not surprised by the continued failures and that tomorrow's demonstration will prove conclusively that human technology cannot match Confederation defenses. Frank checked his rifle for the 10th time, loading one of the special bullets they had crafted. We'll see about that. Morning came too quickly. Susan dressed in her most professional outfit and pinned her university ID to her lapel. Frank put on a construction worker's uniform he had purchased the night before. Remember, Susan said as they prepared to separate, I'll position myself on the north side of the park. That will give you the clearest shot. Frank nodded. If this works, there will be chaos. Get away quickly and meet me at the backup location. Susan touched his arm. And if it doesn't work? Frank gave her a grim smile. Then I'm just a crazy man who took a shot at an alien. You deny knowing me. The demonstration had drawn a large crowd. Susan showed her credentials and was allowed into the scientific observer section. From there, she watched as Zixtal and 5 other aliens took the stage. Today we will demonstrate our personal shield technology, Zixtal announced. These shields are worn by all Confederation officials and can stop any projectile or energy weapon. Meanwhile, Frank had easily gained access to the office building under construction. He climbed to the 12th floor and found a window that had been removed for replacement. The opening gave him a perfect view of the park 780 meters away. He set up his position carefully, laying out his shooting mat and settling his rifle on its bipod. Through his scope, he could see the aliens clearly. He watched as Susan took her position on the north side of the gathering. Below, Zixtal activated his personal shield. A faint blue shimmer surrounded the alien's tall form. We will now demonstrate the shield's effectiveness, Zixtal said. Your military has provided various weapons for this test. Frank watched as soldiers fired pistols, rifles, and even a small rocket launcher at the alien leader. Each projectile bounced harmlessly off the shield or exploded before impact. As you can see, Zixtal said with smug confidence, not even your best weapons can touch me. Frank took a deep breath and settled into his shooting stance. He calculated for distance, wind, and atmospheric conditions. These calculations came as naturally as breathing after years of combat experience. The special bullet waited in the chamber. All his skill, Susan's science, and humanity's future came down to this single shot. 24 days remain in your challenge, Zixtal was saying. But I think we have conclusively demonstrated. Frank exhaled half a breath and gently squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked, the sound lost in the city noise. The bullet flew true, traveling at exactly 853 meters per second, just as they had calculated. Time seemed to slow as the bullet traveled toward its target. In the less than 1 second it took to cross the distance, Frank's mind flashed through 20 years of combat experience. Countless shots taken in deserts and mountains across Earth. Never had so much depended on a single pull of the trigger. Through his scope, Frank watched the bullet approach the shimmering blue field surrounding Zixtal. For a moment, the shield rippled, energy waves spreading outward from the point of impact like water disturbed by a stone. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of bouncing away like every other projectile, the bullet slowed, the shield stretching inward like a rubber membrane. For a heartbeat, the bullet hung suspended in the barrier. The shield flickered, flashed bright blue, then collapsed entirely. The bullet continued through, slightly off its original path due to the shield's resistance. It missed Zixtal's head by centimeters, but sliced cleanly through the decorative shoulder piece of his ceremonial armor. Absolute silence fell over the crowd. Zixtal reached up slowly, touching the damaged armor with 2 of his 4 hands. His large eyes widened in what Frank recognized as pure shock. Then chaos erupted. Alien security personnel swarmed around their leader, creating a protective formation. Human security forces began evacuating civilians from the area. Scientists in the observation area, including Susan, were pushed back by guards. Frank quickly broke down his rifle and packed it into his bag. He needed to move fast before they tracked the shot to his location. As he turned to leave, he heard heavy footsteps on the stairs below. They had found him more quickly than expected. He looked around desperately for another exit. The window he had used for his shot was too high to jump. The only other option was a construction elevator on the outside of the building. Frank ran toward it, hearing shouts behind him. "Stop! Federal agents!" Frank didn't look back. He reached the elevator and hit the down button. As the platform began its slow descent, he saw armed men burst into the room he had just left. One spotted him and shouted, but they couldn't reach him now. At the park, Susan pushed her way forward against the crowd fleeing in the opposite direction. She needed to see what had happened. Had their bullet worked? Through the chaos, she caught glimpses of Zixtal. The alien leader was surrounded by guards but appeared unharmed. He was examining something in his hands, the piece of armor the bullet had struck. A human general approached the alien cautiously. "Are you injured, High Commander?" Zixtal looked up, his expression unreadable to human eyes. "I am unharmed. But this," he held up the damaged armor piece. "This is impossible." Susan couldn't help herself. She pushed forward past the security line. "It's not impossible," she called out. "It's physics." All eyes turned to her. Alien guards moved to intercept her, but Zixtal raised one of his hands. "Let her approach," he commanded. Susan walked forward on shaky legs. She felt the weight of dozens of stares, both human and alien. "Explain yourself," Zixtal demanded. "Your shields create counterwaves to whatever hits them," Susan said, her voice steadier than she felt. "The more energy in the incoming object, the stronger the counterwave. But a specific material, moving at a precise velocity, creates a harmonic resonance that your shield can't properly counter." Zixtal's eyes narrowed. "What is your name, human?" "Dr. Susan Carter, physicist." "And did you fire this shot, Dr. Carter?" Susan swallowed hard. "No, I developed the theory. My colleague took the shot." Meanwhile, Frank had reached the ground and slipped into the panicked crowd flowing away from the park. He ditched his construction uniform in a trash bin, revealing regular clothes underneath. As he moved with the crowd, his military training kept him calm despite the sirens and shouting. He checked his watch. If all went according to plan, Susan would meet him at their backup location in 1 hour, if she could get away. Back at the park, Zixtal studied Susan with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "You have done something no species has accomplished in 800 years of Confederation history," he said finally. "You have breached our shield technology." Susan stood her ground as alien security personnel surrounded her. Human military officers joined them, their expressions a mix of confusion and alarm. "Take her to our embassy," Zixtal ordered. "I wish to continue this conversation in private." A human general stepped forward. "With respect, High Commander, Dr. Carter is an American citizen. You can't simply take her." Zixtal's upper arms crossed while his lower ones gestured dismissively. "Would you prefer I declare this an act of war? Someone just attempted to assassinate me." "No one tried to kill you," Susan said firmly. "If we wanted that, the shot would have been aimed differently. This was a demonstration, just like yours. We proved humans can breach your technology." The general looked at Susan with renewed interest. "Dr. Carter, did you authorize this action?" Susan lifted her chin. "I acted on my own, with one colleague. We believed Earth needed to know if the shields could be breached." After a tense negotiation, they'd reached a compromise. Susan would be taken to the alien embassy, but with human officials present. As they led her away, she managed to glance at her watch. Frank would be waiting at their meeting point soon. He would have to wait longer. Frank paced in the small hotel room they had designated as their backup location. 2 hours had passed since the shot, and Susan hadn't appeared. The television showed chaos in downtown Washington. Reports mentioned a security incident at the alien demonstration, but details were scarce. A knock at the door made him freeze. He approached cautiously, hand reaching for his concealed pistol. "Who is it?" he called. "Joe Green, Susan's brother-in-law." Frank opened the door a crack, then wider when he recognized the man. "How did you find me?" Frank asked. "Susan told me about your backup plan," Joe said, entering quickly. "She called me from the alien embassy. They're questioning her." Frank's stomach tightened. "Is she under arrest?" "Not exactly, but she's been asked to reveal who took the shot." Frank sat heavily on the bed. "She tell them?" Joe shook his head. "Not yet, but she asked me to find you and tell you to leave town. They're searching for a sniper." Frank ran a hand through his hair. "I'm not leaving her to face this alone." "She thought you'd say that," Joe replied with a grim smile. "That's why she told me to tell you she has a plan. Wait 24 hours before doing anything rash." At the alien embassy, Susan sat in a sterile white room. Across from her, Zixtal studied her with his large, unsettling eyes. 2 human officials sat nearby, watching the exchange carefully. "Your primitive projectile weapon should not have penetrated my shield," Zixtal said. "Explain how this happened." Susan took a deep breath. "Your shields are designed to stop energy weapons and high-velocity impacts. They create perfect counterwaves. But our bullet wasn't high-tech. It was specifically designed to create a harmonic resonance that temporarily disrupted your shield's frequency." "Impossible," one of the other aliens muttered. "No race has discovered this vulnerability." "Maybe because every other race tries to develop bigger, more powerful weapons," Susan suggested. "Humans are different. We look for elegant solutions, not just brute force." Zixtal leaned forward. "You said you worked with a colleague. Who fired the shot?" Susan met his gaze steadily. "I can't tell you that." "You realize this demonstration could be seen as an act of aggression. Or it could be seen as meeting your challenge," Susan countered. "You said if humans could breach your shield technology, Earth would be granted full membership status. We breached it." The room fell silent. Zixtal's 4 hands tapped rhythmically against the table, a gesture Susan couldn't interpret. "I must consult with the Confederation Council," he finally said. "This development is unexpected." As the aliens left the room, one of the human officials leaned toward Susan. "Do you realize what you've done?" he whispered. "This could change everything." Susan nodded. That was the point. Across town, Frank watched the hotel room television as breaking news announced that Earth's status was now being reconsidered by the Galactic Confederation following an unexpected development at today's demonstration. He smiled slightly. Their crazy plan had worked. They had shown the aliens that humans were not to be underestimated. Now he just needed to find a way to help Susan. The next 24 hours were the longest of Frank's life. He stayed in the hotel room, watching news reports and waiting for word from Susan. Joe brought him food and updates, but there wasn't much to share. Susan remained at the alien embassy, and the world waited for the Confederation's response. On the second morning, Frank's burner phone rang. He answered it cautiously. Frank Miller. An unfamiliar voice asked. "Who's asking?" "General Alan Porter, Joint Chiefs. We need to talk." Frank's grip tightened on the phone. "How did you get this number?" "Dr. Carter provided it. She's requested your presence at the embassy." Frank hesitated. Could be a trap. "Mr. Miller, if we wanted to arrest you, we would have done so already. We've known your location since yesterday." Dr. Carter convinced us, and surprisingly the aliens, that what you two did was necessary. An hour later, a black SUV delivered Frank to the alien embassy. The building had been a regular office tower just weeks ago, now transformed with strange technology that made it seem otherworldly. Armed guards, both human and alien, watched him carefully as he was escorted inside. They led him to a large conference room, where Susan sat at a round table with several human officials and 3 aliens, including Zixtal. Susan's face lit up when she saw him, though she remained seated. "Lieutenant Frank Miller," Zixtal said, rising to his full height. "The human who breached our shield." Frank nodded once, saying nothing. He took the empty seat beside Susan. "How are you?" he whispered. "Better now," she replied quietly. General Porter cleared his throat. "Now that Lieutenant Miller is here, we can continue our discussion." Zixtal's 4 arms moved in a complex gesture. "The Confederation Council has been in emergency session for the past day. Your demonstration has created quite a stir. Some council members view your actions as hostile," added another alien, shorter than Zixtal with pale green skin. "They believe humans are too dangerous to join the Confederation as equals." Frank tensed, but Susan placed a calming hand on his arm. "However," Zixtal continued, "others see great value in a species that can think so differently. No race has considered using a simple kinetic weapon against our shields in over 800 years. All focus on energy weapons and increasing power. Sometimes the old ways work best," Frank said simply. "Indeed." Zixtal turned to a display on the wall. It showed the bullet that Frank had fired, now floating in some kind of scanning field. This primitive projectile contains an alloy mix that created a perfect harmonic disruption in our shield frequency. "Most impressive." Susan leaned forward. "Will you honor your challenge? Earth proved we can breach your shields." The room fell silent as Zixtal considered. "The challenge was issued, and you met it fairly. Despite some council members' concerns, I have decided to honor our agreement." Relief washed over the humans in the room. General Porter exchanged glances with his colleagues. "So Earth will receive full membership status?" Porter asked. "With conditions," Zixtal replied. "You will share the shield technology with no other race. And these 2 humans will work with our scientists to help us improve our defenses." Frank looked at Susan, raising an eyebrow. She gave him a small nod. "We can agree to those terms," Porter said. Zixtal extended one of his 4 hands toward Frank. "The Confederation has not faced a real challenge in centuries. Your primitive weapon reminded us that we still have much to learn." Frank stood and shook the alien's hand. It felt cool and smooth, with 3 long fingers that wrapped around his hand in a surprisingly firm grip. "One question," Frank said. "Why did you issue the challenge in the first place? Weren't you risking Earth gaining full status?" Zixtal's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "The challenge is traditional, issued to all new races. In 800 years, none has succeeded. We became complacent. Susan stood as well. What happens now? Now, Zixtal said, we prepare to welcome Earth as the newest full member of the Galactic Confederation, and perhaps learn from each other. 6 months passed quickly. Earth buzzed with excitement as preparations for full Confederation membership continued. Alien technology began to appear in everyday life. Medical breakthroughs cured diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. Clean energy sources replaced fossil fuels. The world transformed. Frank stood at the window of his new office, looking out at the Washington skyline. The alien embassy now had a human wing, where he and Susan worked alongside Confederation scientists. Their days were filled with testing shield frequencies and developing new defensive technologies that combined human ingenuity with alien science. Big day tomorrow, Susan said, entering his office with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Frank. Never thought I'd be giving a presentation to representatives from 27 alien worlds, Frank replied, accepting the cup gratefully. Susan smiled. Never thought I'd be co-director of an interspecies research division either. Tomorrow marked Earth's official induction into the Galactic Confederation. Delegates from across the galaxy had arrived to witness the historic event. Frank and Susan would present their findings on shield technology as part of the ceremony. Have you finished packing? Susan asked. Frank nodded. After the ceremony, they would leave Earth on a Confederation vessel for a tour of allied worlds. They would be the first humans to travel beyond the solar system. Still hard to believe all this started with one bullet, Frank said quietly. A knock at the door interrupted them. Zixtal entered, ducking slightly under the human-sized doorframe. Over the months, they had developed an unusual friendship with the alien commander. The final preparations are complete, Zixtal announced. The Council is pleased with your shield enhancement proposals. Their research had led to significant improvements in Confederation defensive technology. By studying how Frank's bullet had breached the shield, they developed new barriers that were resistant to harmonic disruption. There is something else, Zixtal continued, placing a small ornate box on Frank's desk. The Council wished me to present this to you privately before tomorrow's ceremony. Frank opened the box carefully. Inside lay his bullet, now mounted in a clear crystal display. Alien writing circled the base. What does it say? Susan asked, leaning closer. In simple terms, it honors the shot that changed galactic history, Zixtal explained. It will be displayed in the Confederation's Central Museum after tomorrow's ceremony. Frank ran a finger over the crystal case. Just a simple bullet. That is what makes it remarkable, Zixtal said. In all our technological advancement, we forgot the power of simplicity. My people became so focused on energy weapons and complex defenses that we overlooked basic physical principles. Susan nodded. Sometimes the old ways still work. This is the gift humans bring to the Confederation, Zixtal continued. A fresh perspective. A willingness to try solutions that others consider obsolete or primitive. After Zixtal left, Frank and Susan sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset over Washington. You know what still bothers me, Frank said eventually. Why did they really issue that challenge? They must have known there was a risk, however small, that someone might succeed. Susan considered this. I asked Zixtal that same question last week. He said something interesting. He said the Confederation had grown stagnant. Some leaders secretly hoped someone would succeed, to shake things up. So we were part of some internal political game. Not exactly. He said the challenge was genuine, but some hoped it would eventually force the Confederation to evolve. Susan smiled. They just didn't expect it to happen with Earth, or so quickly. The next morning, Frank stood on the stage beside Susan and Earth's political leaders. Before them sat delegates from worlds so distant humans had never even seen their stars. As the formal induction began, Frank's mind drifted back to his cabin in Montana, to the moment he first saw the aliens on his small television. How different the world was now. just because he had noticed something no one else had, a slight ripple in a shield that everyone thought was perfect. When it was his turn to speak, Frank stepped forward. He looked out at the assembled representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. The most powerful technology can sometimes be defeated by the simplest solution, he began. That is the lesson Earth brings to the stars.